Breaking updates, very important. Snow White, there's been an enormous amount of controversy surrounding Snow White, obviously.
I think it's fair to say that no one can stand the star of this movie.
A lot of people don't like her. A lot of people don't like her either. She's got a big mouth. She talked trash about the original movie.
Controversy has been dogging this movie since the very beginning. So much so that the Daily Wire, I think we played a major role in basically forcing Disney to go reshoot it. Well, it didn't help, apparently. Disney's Snow White was essentially a box office dud.
Disney's new live-action remake of Snow White debuted this weekend, and it's an even bigger dud than anticipated.
The reason we had Rachel Zegler on the docket is she's an asshole.
Disney is having its own problems. They're finally releasing the latest adaptation of Snow White, but they're scaling back the Hollywood premiere of the film. Kinsey, why is that?
Because Rachel Zegler is a PR nightmare.
And now you better have a good reason to get people to the theaters, and this ain't it. The movie apparently is not very good. I haven't seen it yet. I would be shocked if it were. Again, the star, Rachel Zegler, is unbelievably charmless in public. Studios really need to go back to what they originally did, which was tell your stars to shut up and not say things, because no one is paying to hear your star say offensive things off the screen.
This is someone who is as entitled as, I don't need your business. You know what? Maybe Disney does. Maybe you're a tool, you're a pawn in this film. You didn't write it. You didn't direct it. You have nothing to do with the creation of Snow White. Right. You should shut up and do the job.
Now, one thing about Rachel Zegler is that we know that she's not helping at all one bit.
Every time she opens her mouth, it's crisis mode when it comes to Disney, having to backtrack. She talks about how this isn't a fairy tale about falling in love with the prince. This is a fairy tale about fighting your own battle.
She's not like the ideal choice for the lead role in Sweet Snow White.
Now, one thing that is already universally known at this point by the general public is the fact that Disney is in full-on damage control mode.
This is truly, like, she has to go. I'm sorry, Disney. She has to go.
I know this point has been made, but this truly is the worst casting maybe in the history of the film industry.
There are a lot of reasons you have to suspend disbelief when you watch a movie like Snow White. There's magic, and there's talking forests and animals that act in human ways and such. But probably the biggest aspect of disbelief you have to suspend is the idea that Gal Gadot, as the wicked witch here, as the evil stepmother, is somehow less good looking than Rachel Zegler. Come on, gang. We ain't blind.
Neither of them make any sense for their roles. We've already covered how Rachel Zegler is a terrible choice for Snow White. Gal Gadot, who plays the queen, the first problem is that she's the evil queen. The evil queen is supposed to be envious of Snow White's beauty, and that is just not believable. I cannot buy that Gal Gadot is angry that she's not as beautiful as Rachel Zegler. I cannot buy that.
I understand that we're supposed to pretend that disabilities no longer exist or something, but we're not all blind. We can still see. I don't know if that mirror was broken.
Has there been a film with worse casting than this? And I don't just mean the Snow White actress. Obviously, she's terrible, but both of them.
Oh, man.
Hello, Disney. You're going to have to redo your film again because this woman is a pig and you fired Gina Carano for far less than this nonsense.
There's a reason why the public has shifted. If you can't avoid this movie, you absolutely should because it's absolute trash. I know some people like this movie. Some people are stupid. Oops! Oops!
Welcome back to Tea Time with Tina. So picture this, a beloved classic, a star who seems less than thrilled about said classic, and a commentary titan who smells a flop a mile away. That's exactly the three-act drama we got when Ben Shapiro set his sights on Disney's new Snow White.
Then they decided to cast Rachel Zegler, who is Hispanic, as Snow White. Now, again, you can cast people however you want to cast people. I really don't care. However, Snow White, in which the description of the character is skin as white as snow, lips red as the rose, right? I mean, there's an actual physical description of the part. Not my fault it's written that way. It ain't racist to write it that way. That's the description of the part. That's what it is. The name of the movie is Snow White, okay?
And specifically on Rachel Zegler, the actress who took on the princess role like it was some kind of tedious chore.
If I'm gonna stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed on.
While Snow White's original claim to fame was singing in the forest and charming dwarfs, this remake seems to have done the opposite. It chanted confusion, cost a fortune, and quite possibly gave Disney executives more heart palpitations than the evil queen herself.
Behind the scenes, you guys know as well as I do that those executives like Spielberg are looking at that saying, Rachel Zegler can F right off.
Now buckle up as we break down how this fairy tale makeover went from, hey, that might be cool, to a cautionary tale about what not to do when reviving an 80-year-old masterpiece. Here's the full story, minus any actual dwarfs. Ready? Let's jump in. Our story begins with Disney deciding it was time to dust off Snow White, the first ever full-length animated feature from the 1930s. The original is iconic, beloved, and by all accounts, a pretty risky film to tinker with. But Disney, no stranger to revivals, went ahead anyway, casting Rachel Zegler fresh off her breakout in a musical hit.
One of the reasons why Rachel Zegler sticks around is she's got a beautiful voice and she has some talent. So I think that certainly helps her because she's a PR nightmare. I don't know how anyone would hire her.
At first, fans were curious. How would Disney handle this classic without losing its innocent charm? Then rumors floated around that the dwarfs weren't exactly dwarfs anymore, and that alone caused the internet's eyebrows to shoot halfway to the moon.
It showed that the dwarves were not in fact dwarves in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, because that would be offensive apparently to little people, so instead they just made the dwarves normal-sized humans, which was idiotic because that's not the story. Then they decided they couldn't actually cast, little people in these roles, so they decided to cast big people and then shrink them down using CGI so it looks terrible.
But hey, maybe it was just a creative spin, right? Surely Disney had a plan, right? Or maybe not. Let's dive deeper. If you're the face of a famously sweet and dreamy character, maybe avoid telling fans you find the original outdated in pretty blunt terms.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Never revisited Snow White again. So I watched it for the first time in probably 16, 17 years.
Yet that's precisely what Zegler did. In multiple interviews, she made it known she wasn't the biggest cheerleader of the 1937 classic storyline, effectively describing it as, well, a relic that no longer deserves star treatment.
I know that you've told me before that your version of Snow White is different, and it's more of a 2022 version of Snow White. What did you mean by that?
I mean, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.
After that, you should have seen some of the fans' reaction. Jaws dropped, heads scratched. If your lead princess can't muster up at least some nostalgia for the original film, how can she sell the fantasy to everyone else? It was like hiring someone to host a birthday party who shows up complaining about how birthdays are pointless. People started to sense trouble. Speaking of trouble, let's talk about the missing dwarfs. The original Snow White story revolves around the friendship between the princess and her 7 pint-sized pals, each with a distinct personality. But in the new version, they were swapped out for ambiguous, magical creatures. Because sure, who needs Sneezy and Doc when you can have random CGI sidekicks whose backstories are as murky as a pond at midnight?
Did the dwarfs make it or no?
Well, the CGI dwarfs did. Of course, that goes back to the original controversy where Peter Dinklage, a very talented little person actor, said, "Why are we doing that?"
Now, before we dive deeper, don't forget to like and subscribe because let's face it, I'm nothing without your support. Now back to the tea. Fans took to social media, pointing out that the very title Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is practically set in stone for a reason. This bold departure had many viewers feeling the magic was lost before the film even arrived in theaters. And if that wasn't enough, the next bombshell sealed this remake's fate like an apple dunked in a suspicious potion. To make matters even more dramatic, Disney poured a massive sum, reportedly in the hundreds of millions, into bringing Snow White to life.
It cost $270 million to make. $270 million.
You'd think a big budget would guarantee jaw-dropping visuals, brilliant marketing, and a cast that'd be carefully coached on not insulting the original. Yet somehow the money went everywhere but to reassuring fans that this was a faithful, heartwarming remake. From early trailers that focused more on sweeping landscapes than on the actual story, to promotional posters that left fans scratching their heads, it was clear Disney was trying something grand.
Disney has botched this Snow White movie every way it's possible to botch the Snow White movie. So you'll recall that originally the Snow White movie starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, you'll remember that film had a trailer so awful that Disney had to completely recut the movie.
However, the grander it seemed, the more the audience braced for disappointment. Would high-priced CGI stand in for the dwarfs everyone loved? Could glossy effects make up for a star who seemed lukewarm about the source material? According to the box office results, the answer might be a resounding no. When opening weekend rolled around, people expected a moderate success at least. This was, after all, a Disney princess movie. Early projections hovered in the $50 million range, which is already underwhelming for a film with a rumored $270 million production and marketing budget. But even that modest figure proved too optimistic. Snow White limped in a few million lower, prompting everyone to realize that, yes, this was officially a flop.
Early estimates suggested that they would take in 48 to 58 million in the first weekend. Apparently, it did 43 million in its first weekend. But this live-action remake is a giant fail. It is not doing well at the box office.
That means Snow White is destined to be one of the biggest bombs in Disney history. It will not recoup.
News spread fast. Headlines declared that audiences weren't enchanted by the new Snow White. Pundits rattled off reasons: the sidelining of the dwarfs, the overuse of CGI, or maybe the star's not-so-complimentary remarks about the original.
Now you have Rachel Zegler saying, oh, that 1937 movie, that's just, oh, it's tacky, it's weird, we're going to change all that.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
And that's exactly when fans decided to drop the hammer, the dwarfless pickaxe, on Rachel Zegler and the entire production. Now, if your lead actress keeps telling the world how outdated the original story is, guess what happens? The audience checks out. Fans dubbed it a self-inflicted wound for Disney, pointing out that their marketing pitch basically boiled down to, hey, remember that classic you love? Well, we changed most of it, and the star thinks the old version is silly, so buy a ticket, please. Fans dissected each questionable decision with the same level of intensity one might use to critique a burnt soufflé. The missing dwarfs, a bizarre creative misstep. The star's aloof attitude toward the story, PR poison, the staggering budget that crashed harder than a carriage without wheels. That was the cherry on top of this disaster Sunday. Fans found themselves torn between disappointment, bewilderment, and a dash of schadenfreude. On one hand, some folks felt genuinely let down because they wanted to see a fresh but respectful spin on Snow White. On the other hand, it's hard to muster sympathy for a production that seemed to tiptoe around the very elements that made the story a beloved staple for decades. Rumors surfaced that Disney execs were blindsided by the backlash, claiming they had no idea Zegler's interviews would stir such negative feelings. If that's true, it might be the biggest plot twist in the entire fiasco. In an age where every word an actor says can go viral, it's surprising to think a massive studio wouldn't keep a closer watch on the messaging. Then again, maybe there were internal debates about reshoots or last-minute marketing pivots. Who knows? The final product arrived with all the momentum of a deflated balloon at a birthday party. By the time the film was actually in theaters, the hype was overshadowed by comedic takedowns, and it was echoing across the internet like a dwarfless canyon shout.
But these guys at Disney, they're not that bright, they're not that smart, and we see that because they can't come up with any new IP. Why not write some new movies? You guys sit around, you have billions of dollars, they keep going back and rewriting the classics.
So, is there a silver lining? Possibly. For one, Disney might rethink how they handle reboots of cherished classics. If the formula includes ignoring the main draw, like the dwarfs, and casting a lead who can't hide her boredom with the source material, you might want to tweak your approach. Even big studios can't coast solely on brand recognition if the product feels disconnected from its roots. Secondly, it's a lesson for actors. If you're stepping into an iconic role, at least show respect for what made it iconic. Fans aren't asking for mindless cheerleading, but there's a wide gulf between "I love everything about it" and this story is so outdated." If you can't strike a balance, you might find yourself on the receiving end of a commentator's comedic wrath, and the internet rarely forgets a viral takedown. In the end, with disappointing box office numbers, a star who inadvertently told fans not to bother, and creative choices that left audiences longing for Doc, Grumpy, and the gang, this remake is a prime example of how good intentions can go horribly wrong. So what do you think? Was the downfall triggered by Zegler's remarks alone? Or was the dwarfless storyline the real culprit? Could Disney have salvaged this movie if they'd stuck closer to the 1937 classic? Or are you among the few who actually enjoyed this new spin? Sound off in the comments. And if you appreciate breakdowns of cinematic highs and cringeworthy lows, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next train wreck we uncover. Because if we've learned anything from this Snow White saga, it's that even the grandest fairy tales can fall flat if the magic behind them goes missing. I'll catch you in the next one. Until next time, stay tuned, stay safe, and stay informed. Only on Tea Time with Tina.